So this hose will have a pressure rating on it. So this hose is married to this machine. The first thing I'll check is, what is the PSI or pressure rating or burst pressure on this particular hose? So in this instance it says here 315 bar, or 315. The maximum pressure of this machine is 3,000. The maximum pressure on this machine is 300 bar. So the burst pressure on this in PSI, 315 bar, that's 4,576.5 PSI. So I'm well under the capacity of the machine in relation to the pressure rating of this. So what you'll find is that your hoses that you use in relative terms have a higher rated pressure than what the capacity of the machine is. Why do we do that? Because if the machine peaks, spikes, this here has the capacity to maintain that pressure or harness that pressure within the hose without bursting. So just to reiterate on that again, the pressure, the maximum pressure of this machine is 300 bar. This hose is rated to 315 bar. So there's more than adequate pressure here, pressure control, to harness what this pump can deliver. So remember that checking that, the pressure of the hose, you'll also find that on the lance, it's also written on the lance what the dangers are and what the maximum pressure of that particular lance are. It's always written there. So to ensure that you're safe, you will check that to ensure this maximum pressure, which is 330 bar, is indicative to the hose pressure and consistent with the compliance plate in relation to pressure ratings. So 1, 2, 3. They all have to comply so that you ensure that you maintain safety. What I would never do is use a hose that's less than the pressure rating of this, because these hoses are like a hydraulic hose. They've got a wire braid around them with an internal line-on lining, and then you've got the swaging or the wrap on the outside of them. So it's important to remember, I can't crimp this hose. If I put a crimp in it, it's deemed unsafe and has to be removed from site, cut and put in the rubbish bin. If there's any abrasions, significant nicks out of the hose, again it's deemed inoperable and removed from the machine. If you manage to bend this lance, a small bend, a minor radius, it's deemed unsafe, primarily because this will be 316 tube, and because 316 is not a pliable metal, if you bend it too much, you undermine its integral wall strength, and again, there could be an accident or incident. So if you bend them, you need to replace them. These fittings on here, this is what we call a quick release. Now you'll find the quick release here in smaller units. You won't find this once we go to 7,000, 10,000, 20,000 PSI, primarily because this is deemed safe up to 10,000, or 7,000, sorry. You go to 7,000 above that, that's when you're asking a bit too much of that particular fitting to hold that pressure. So is there any pressure here? Well, of course there is, because there's back pressure from the nozzle, and when you open the trigger, there is still maintained pressure within this line. So the same pressure that's running through that hose runs through this lance. As a consequence of water passage that's relatively quick, it can become quite hot, so it can heat the water up. So that's what this is for. It's actually just a safety device to reduce the possibility of you burning yourself from this lance getting warm. Now, having said that, this is a cold water machine, but I can actually pump or supply this machine with hot water, but only up to 60 degrees. Any more than 60 degrees, and the seals and the pistons in this pump can't cope with anything hotter than that, and the seals will actually umbrella themselves and the machine will cease to function. So remember, 60 degrees is the maximum I can put into this pump. So sometimes, yes, I may need hot water or warm water to remove grease or whatever the contaminants may be on the surface that I'm trying to remove. So we have a lance that complies, fittings that comply, hoses that comply, hose must be rinsed. So I can attach the hose like I've done, and I can run the machine without the gun attached. Would the hose whip around? Basically, the nozzles on these particular machines are quite small. So the nozzles on the machine are the thing that give you the pressure. It's exactly the same as holding your finger over the hose, over a garden hose. So if I hold my finger over a garden hose, you'll notice that if I just let it spray, the water just runs out. Well, basically that's what this does without a nozzle on it. But you'll notice if you put your finger over the hose, you create a restriction and the water starts to fan out and there's more pressure and it goes further. Same concept, same. So that's what the nozzles do in these machines. They reduce the water flow and increase the pressure. So whilst this machine is pumping water up, it's hydraulically pushing the water up to this particular nozzle, and because it's only got a tiny hole to come out, it slows the water speed, the water flow down, but increases the speed of the water. So does that make sense? It slows the water flow down, but increases the speed of the water. Same as when I put my finger over this hose. So that's the concept. So that's why when you're utilizing this particular nozzle with the trigger depressed, you don't put your hand or face anywhere near it because it will inject you. So what's the consequence of a water injection? Well, just say, for example, I did shoot myself or hit myself in the foot or the leg or the finger. Oh, well, it doesn't matter, there's no blood coming out. To be quite honest with you, that's worse, because there's no blood coming out. That means that it's been a massive impregnation of water within my skin. So I've actually just injected myself. That's a serious injury. Because we use potable water, it doesn't mean that all the microorganisms within the water have been removed because I've got a filter on there. I've actually injected water into my skin that's got these microorganisms in them that can spread through my body relatively quickly. So the hazard is quite substantial. So if I inject myself or hit myself on any part of my body, again, that's treated like a snake bite. So it has a pressure bandage and straight off to the hospital. So you need to tell them and inform them that I've just injected myself with high pressure water. That's a serious injury and it must be dealt with immediately. So remember, a pressure bandage on whichever part of the body you've hit, contact the ambulance or the emergency services and alert them to what you've just done, irrespective of how minor you think that damage is. So if you follow that procedure, and hopefully you never need to, you've got a good chance of surviving that particular injury.